Dear colleagues, this is day 271 of Ukraine's heroic resistance. My name is Natalia Staroprava. We're continuing our series of briefings at Mediacentru Ukraine. With us is Dmytro Zhyvytskyi, head of the Sumy Regional Military Administration. Hello, sir. Hello. Could you tell us about the situation in the Sumy region? The enemy obviously continues to shell uh, the residential building, peaceful and infrastructure. Could you tell us about the situation on the ground? The situation in the region is under control. It's stable. Unfortunately, daily shellings from the territory of the Russian Federation, from the terrorist state, the aggressor state, continue in our border localities. The day before yesterday, I think we've had one quiet day in the past God knows how many months, 3 or 4 months. But yesterday, shellings continued. Three communities came under fire. The hardest hit was the Bilopilska community, where several shops, a community culture center was destroyed, residential buildings, the gas supply system, and a power line. And unfortunately, there's almost daily we have either destroyed or buildings that have been either destroyed or burnt to the ground. We're talking about usually villages close to the border area where people live in private buildings, and usually these buildings that come under fire, that are destroyed, that suffer the biggest damage. Likewise, the enemy is hitting critical infrastructure, including small power plants in the villages, small transformators in the villages, aqueducts, uh, agricultural companies. We constantly see burning crops. Uh, this is deliberately hit by Russian shelling, and we keep seeing that Russia is acting as a terrorist state. Um, that wants to leave our people without light, water, food, and is simply killing peaceful civilians in the Sumy region. As you've said, the enemy has damaged power lines and the gas supply. There are some problems. Could you tell us about the situation? Because obviously it's cold now outside. Are there any alternatives in place for people to live their daily lives decently? Right, we're preparing heating places and other objects uh, where we hope that if we have an emergency and no power, we're hoping to have these in place so that people can keep warm, charge up their phones. We will soon publish information about what we're doing and about what people ought to do in case of particular emergencies. Right now, we have sort of a beta version, a test version of two such points. They've been operating since Friday night. This is opened by the emergency department. They will be deployed all over the region, where people will be able to get information. So the Sumy region is at the edge of our energy system, and unfortunately, it's taking perhaps the greatest damage from power cuts. We have hourly schedules for cutting power, rolling blackouts. We Right now, the Ukrinform has shut off about 190,000 subscribers off of the about 550,000, just over 500,000 people making use of the Oblenergo, the power users. So almost 200,000 people are without power. Very often, I'd like to use the opportunity to address the residents of the Sumy region. Very often, the graphs change as the day develops. we might announce one thing in the morning based on information that we have from Ukrenergo and Oblenergo. We try to do our best to provide specific times as to how the power will be cut. Either you might get power for 2 hours and then not have power for 6 hours, or vice versa, or 2 hours every 4 hours, but there might be changes, and it's very hard to predict. Unfortunately, we cannot predict this because information about the amount of power in the system that can be provided to the Sumy region and the number of people is fed to us centrally from Ukrenergo. And I urge the residents of Sumy region to please stay calm and please not to be too resentful of us, because it's very difficult to predict the situation with the blackouts. We're doing all we can. We're doing our level best to at least try and inform people, give them a sense of what they might expect, but it's very difficult to do. We're all working 24/7. The government, the president's office, are working 24/7 to stabilize the grid, to stabilize the energy system. As of yesterday, we had blackout schedules in 15 regions, including the Sumy region, introduced. We're at the edge of this grid, of this energy system, and unfortunately, very often we simply get less power than the central or western regions of Ukraine. Previously, our energy system was linked and harmonized with the Russian Federation. Starting from 2014, we started the process of decoupling from the Russian grid, and as of today, we're completely separated. We have no connections with the Russian system. So with our destroyed plants, it's very difficult, power plants, it's very difficult to provide stable, reliable voltage in the grid and supply unbroken power. Unfortunately, we don't know what the enemy will be doing tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. We don't know what will happen to our energy grid, to our energy system. So I call on the people to charge up their power banks, have backup of water and food, so that we might jointly go through these difficulties, these hardships together. We're preparing. The local administration authorities are buying the necessities. We have help from our partners, from the UN, from international charity organizations. We've turned to various embassies of several states with requests to help us with power generators. And residents of the Sumy region can be sure that in case of emergencies that arise with prolonged blackouts, should the power be cut for extended times, we will do our best. We will take care of them, so to provide places where people may keep warm, charge their phones, and have some hot food and connections. Considering the planned blackout and the unpredictable situations from the part of the Russian enemy destroying critical infrastructures, what are your recommendations to those who are working online, to those who are students online, for businesses, or for those who work online? Many enterprises have already bought their own larger generators abroad. For instance, last week, a leading company of the Sumy, the city, have bought a 1 megawatt, 1.5 megawatt generator for themselves to ensure the work of their enterprises. And this unstable energy situation, in order to keep the economy going and to keep the enterprises going, of course, it's necessary to take care of, to ensure unbroken power supply, particularly electrical power, so that work can continue. So that at least people might plug in their phone if they're working remotely, or if it's some big production, to think about where we might economize, what sources of consumption can be shut down to minimize consumption of power, and how much unbroken, uninterrupted voltage need to be provided. For instance, even myself, I bought just a car battery for myself at home and a charger, and in order to be able to at least charge up the phone, turn on the computer, and perhaps turn on the kettle, put on the kettle. This is unfortunately all we can do right now at home to at least minimize the adverse effects of the power cuts. Uh, Back in the day and to this day, the authorities have called shops and other businesses to shut off the light, to shut off the advertising neon lights. Obviously, the holidays are coming. I cannot not mention this. What will be the situation in the city and in the region? Will people be using additional holiday lighting? I think that in spite of the war and in spite of the difficult situation in the state, people need at least a few hours or a few days, um, the ability to shut off, to not think about stress all the time. But even professionals, psychologists say that you cannot just be constantly stressed. You need to switch off sometimes to be effective, to retain your mental, your health. You know, people need to switch off sometimes. I mean, I try to go to a theater once or twice a week, and then at least dedicate 2 hours to not thinking about the daily the daily work and the events happening. But when the street lighting is turned off, when we're calling everybody to economize power prior to the new year, unfortunately the situation we don't anticipate the situation changing prior to the new year, because there's a war and the energy grid, energy infrastructure has been significantly severely damaged. So everything will depend on what opportunities we have, what capacity we have to provide power to our cities and villages. If we're still in saving mode, in energy saving mode, then of course additional holiday festive lighting, illuminations, laser projections, etc. Of course, none of that will be happening. If our capacities are such that that we can do this, then of course I support this holiday lighting in the street to give people at least some minimal relief when they're going home from work. Understood, sir. I also wanted to mention the situation that is happening at Ukraine's borders, particularly I'm talking about Volhynia, the Rivne and the Zhytomyr regions, where the border adjacent territories, they're building a wall on the border with Russia and Belarus, as a so-called buffer area. What is the situation in the border area of the Sumy region? Is anything being prepared of this kind? Unfortunately, the daily shellings make it impossible for us to take such steps of the kind that people are taking at the Belarusian border. We cannot erect fences, barbed wire along the border, but we're continuing to strengthen the first and second and the third line defense lines of our localities in our region. We're continuing to build various strengthened points, various defense constructions, trenches, and we do our best to provide heating to the military, various technology, in order to so that the regions of the Sumy region and all of Ukraine are sure that the enemy will not break through the Sumy border. But these kinds of large-scale infrastructure construction projects are right now impossible, just due to the military situation and due to the presence of the Russian army along the border. We see no strike forces that would be trying to break through the Ukrainian border here in the Sumy region, but nevertheless there are detachments that keep not periodically, but that just keep constantly shelling the Sumy region from their territory. and from Velika from the border with the Kharkiv region to the limit with the Chernihiv region, we have unfortunately constant shellings. And this is Shalin, Глухів, Нова Слобода, Хотин, Білополе, Краснополе, Юнаків, Миропіль, Великописарів communities. We have these daily, there's daily shellings. We even get up to 20 kilometers into our territory. We have enemy shells flying in. We've a train depot has been damaged, and a section of the railway track has been damaged. These are essentially the centers of these localities where enemy shells have reached. What additional steps then are planned to strengthen this border line in order to forestall the enemy from pressing on? All of the events that we introduce, along with the military, I can't discuss everything in terms of security, but work the work in terms of strengthening the border is continuing. It was not stopping even for a single day, and it will continue until our victory. Thank you very much. With us was Dmytro Zhyvytskyi, head of the Sumy Regional Military Administration. Thank you, sir. Be well. And this concludes our briefings for today. Please watch our announcements at Mediacentru Ukraine. And we are another day